Okay, hi. It's another beautiful day, which I've spent sat in the cinema. So I'm just coming away from watching Good Boys. I know it came out a couple of weeks ago, but I've not really had time to go and watch it. Which is weird considering I went and watched it yesterday. But Good Boys from the trailers was one of those films that I wanted to kind of catch, but it wasn't a priority. For anyone who doesn't know, it's kind of like, it was kind of marketed as like Superbad with 8-year-olds. Like an R-rated comedy or a 15 comedy, like a bit of a raunchy comedy, but with like, really young kids in the lead instead of, teenagers and that kind of thing. I think Seth Rogen produced it, had a hand in it somewhere along the lines, something like that. Anyway, it's shit, really bad. I didn't laugh once throughout the course of the film. There was a smattering of people in there who were laughing. I don't know if they were stoned or high or whatever, but they kind of laughed. But I didn't really get anything out of the film. It was just kind of like a string of really kind of crappy set pieces. It was just like the story didn't really flow from scene to scene. The kids were trying the hardest to do what they do. They deliver dialogue and all that kind of stuff. And they're not necessarily bad actors. I mean, that young kid, that Jason Tremblay, he's the only one of them that I actually know from other films. I don't know the young black kid, and I don't know the kind of like chubby, spiky haired kid from anything else. I might have seen them in something else, but I don't know who they are off the top of my head. But they kind of do the best to be kids, I suppose, and say the lines, but the problem is it's not as if they come across as having no chemistry. They probably would have chemistry if it was a more straightforward kind of film. The problem is they don't have any comic timing, and that's because they're kids. They might be good child actors, as child actors go, but they're not comics, and I think that's where the kind of film fell down for me. Unfortunately, having the premise of a film, be about a bunch of kids who are becoming sexually kind of like awakened at that point in their life and saying a few fucks here and there, it's not really, well, I thought it could have been funny, but unfortunately it just isn't. So yeah, Good Boys, it's not good. It's pretty fucking bad actually. So I know it's already been out for a few weeks by now. If you've seen it, commiserations. If you're kind of interested in going watching it, I'd probably say take some of what the guys on the back row had taken before they watched it, because they seem to enjoy it a lot more than I did. It's a good job that I actually went and watched another film yesterday, which I didn't bother recording yesterday because last night I recorded the podcast with Chris Manning, the Face Off episode, so I kind of was going to talk about it, and then the conversation got away from us and I didn't end up talking about it. But yesterday I went to watch It Chapter 2, the conclusion of It Chapter 1. And I kind of enjoyed it. Kind of. I think a bit of time has passed now. I came out of the film thinking, a bit of a mixed bag, but overall I enjoyed it, and 24 hours on, I kind of feel the same. It's a tricky one, because the first film worked very well because in a way, by focusing on the kids portion of like the book and the film, it makes the story a little bit more relatable, like immediately relatable, because we've all been kids, we've all, you know, had our little kid cliques and went on adventures and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So there's a familiar beat to the first part of the story when the Losers Club, the Losers Club, look at my t-shirt, I made this morning, the Losers Club are kids, because we've all been there. The second half of the film, which is where the kind of TV miniseries with the Tim Curry Pennywise and John Boyd Walton, you know, focusing on the adult side when they're 27 years older, that's a trickier beast to kind of like, you know, adapt, because the TV miniseries part 2 was much less enjoyable than the, you know, the 1960s set, because obviously it was set in the correct period, miniseries when the kids were, you know, younger. And it felt a little bit like kind of, it always kind of reminds me of Stand By Me, even though it's not on the level of Stand By Me, but that whole section with the kids and, you know, playing down in the barrens and making the dam and, you know, all of those kind of scenes, it felt very Stand By Me-esque, just with the relationship between that group of characters. And you had that in It Chapter 1. And even though there are scenes in this film, even though this is kind of like the adult story 27 years later, there are flashbacks back to when, you know, they were kids, and every time it kind of flashed back, it felt like these may have been scenes that should have originally been in the first film. But I think they were a little bit conscious about overloading the first film with too much stuff, and, you know, trimmed it down. I'm just going to close the, get rid of the J.J. Abrams lens flare there, get rid of that. Yeah, so you know, the flashback scenes feel like they have been transplanted into chapter 2 when they should have, you know, been in the first film. But they, you know, it's one of those, for pacing reasons, it feels like they moved them into the second film, which is knocking on the door of like 3 hours long, you know, and it does feel long at points, especially in the kind of setup. The second half of the film, where, you know, they're all back in Derry, spoilers, and Pennywise is slowly starting to play his mind games with them, and they're beginning to get their memories back throughout the course of the film. That's when, you know, it kind of like comes to life a little bit. The setup of the film and getting them all back felt a little bit laborious, but you have to kind of go through those scenes to actually get them back. But it did. That's the problem with having, you know, 7 characters. You need to balance the film and the scenes that they're in, so that everyone has a fair shake, and that is something that you can do much easier in print than what you can on the screen, unfortunately. So it's always going to be a tricky, I mean, if there is another adaptation, you know, 20, 30 years down the line of it, which inevitably there probably will be, I think it'll come up against the same kind of issues. You know, it'll have a really strong first chapter with the kids, and then when it comes to, you know, bringing them back as adults, because you kind of, when you, the problem is, well, another problem is when you do have the kids, you introduce those characters, and then when those characters have grown old and you've got different actors playing them, in a sense you have to have an establishing scene to reintroduce the character, because it's a different person. Obviously it's a grown-up playing them now, and you have to reintroduce them to the audience in a way, and it becomes, well, it can feel like you're treading old ground, and, you know, it obviously adds to the runtime of this film. That said, like I say, I did, after the film had finished, I came out feeling, okay, yeah, I had a good time with that, because there is a lot in there to actually enjoy. There are some stuff in there that doesn't kind of make sense. Things that they've kind of tweaked from the original story to actually make it work cinematically, because again, spoilers, they haven't really gone down the line of the book with the maturing, the turtle that vomited out our universe when it had a bellyache, blah 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 blah, because that is, well, frankly, it's a ridiculous concept, coming straight out of fucking whatever Stephen King put in his nose when he was writing the book. That, wisely they decided to leave that out. They've kind of like nodded and winked to, maturing. He is, referenced. He's name dropped in there, and there are kind of like, in much as the same way as in the first film, they had like a turtle kind of swimming in the pool when they all jumped in the quarry, and then one of the characters, I think, had a Lego kind of tortoise on his bedside table. That kind of stuff's in this film as well. There is a turtle, that makes an appearance, although it's not maturing, but he is it is name dropped, and they have kind of like changed how the information is passed down to the losers about the ritual of Chud. The ritual of Chud is changed slightly as well, although they say it's a battle of wills and blah 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 blah. How it's kind of handled in the film is different, because again, what works in print isn't necessarily going to work on the screen. So that doesn't matter so much for me. I can kind of roll with the punch. I don't mind people changing the source material if it makes sense in the context of the story that they're telling when they're reinterpreting the film, or reinterpreting the book into a film. It's like Watchmen. I mean, I know people kind of love it or hate it, regardless. I thought the fact that they actually changed the third act of Watchmen, which in the graphic novel, a giant kind of squid shows up in Manhattan and causes mass devastation and kills a load of people. Actually changing the movie and getting rid of that and having the kind of the thing that happens that kills all of those people at the end of the film be linked to Dr. Manhattan in the way that they actually did it was, in the context of the story that was being told on film, made a hell of a lot more sense. So I was fine with that, didn't have an issue with that. And you can point at Lord of the Rings and the changes that they made from the books to the films. Fine. I don't necessarily have an issue with them doing that when it makes sense, as I say. So yeah, Bill Skarsgård. Let's just get onto the cast. The entire cast are really good, apart from the guy who plays Mike. I found him really kind of annoying. Just wait for this person to go. Yeah, he had, like, the whole point of Mike is he stays in Derry, to be kind of like this, the kind of the guardian, the watcher, protect the community somewhat and keep an eye out for things going like south again, and I'll stay here and keep an eye on things, and if it comes back, then I'll let you all know and get you all back and blah 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 blah. And once he's made the phone calls and got all of the losers back to Derry, and we have the scene where they all kind of like meet up again and then slowly start to become more comfortable with each other again as the memories return. They all get to the point where they're like, fuck this, because something happens at the Chinese restaurant. They're like, fuck this, we are out of here, which is an absolute natural reaction. They're like, fuck this, we're getting out of here. There's absolutely no reason for us to stay. We went through this shit once, not again. And he has a number of points where he's just like, guys, I need to tell you something, I need to tell you something, I need to tell you something, please wait while I tell you something, I've got to tell you something. And instead of just fucking telling them what he has to say, he keeps repeating, you know, in that scene and in another couple of scenes, I need to tell you something, I need to tell you, because they're all arguing and squabbling and just not listening to him. But he doesn't make himself heard. He just keeps saying, I need to tell you something, I need to tell you something, I really need to tell you something, instead of just actually fucking telling them exactly what. So I found him quite annoying. He does, you know, once the plot actually moves forward and gets past that point in the story, he does become less annoying. But I felt like Mike in both films is kind of a little bit shortchanged, which is a shame. Because, you know, his character could and should have done more. Like I say, a shame. I feel like Mike was actually treated a little bit better in the TV series, the mini-series, because you got a sense of the sacrifice that he'd made. You know, whereas all of the other losers, when they've left Derry and forgot about Pennywise and it and everything that happened, they all prospered and became really successful. And Mike staying in Derry was repressed to the point of, you know, having it felt like in the TV miniseries that he wasn't able to have a relationship, you know, get married or whatever. And he was going through money problems, and you felt like it took a toll on his life staying back in Derry. Whereas in this one, it's kind of glossed over to a certain degree. And I feel that you know, it wasn't as impactful as what it was in the TV series, which, you know, arguable, I suppose. It was just what I took from it. But the rest of the cast are really good. Obviously, if you've seen any reviews of it, people are pointing out that Bill Hader's really good. He is really good, and he's kind of the heart of the film towards the end of the film when certain things happen. You know, he kind of brings the feels. I felt myself welling up at one point towards the end of the film when, you know, something happens to his character, and I wasn't expecting that. James McAvoy, you know, he's never bad in anything. He's really solid here. His character probably gets the most fleshed out arc of all of the losers, apart from maybe Bev, played by Jessica Chastain, who, you know, is just, I adore her. But that's my weakness for redheads coming through there. Yeah, she's really good. The thing about the other cast, I don't really know the guys who played older Ben and older Eddie, but they have, like, all of them have an uncanny resemblance to the kids that portrayed the same characters in the first film, and it's absolutely spot on casting all around. I know I was kind of like, you know, hoping Amy Adams would be, you know, the grown-up Bev, because I think the kid who played Bev in Chapter 1 is an absolute dead ringer for Amy Adams, more so than Jessica Chastain. But Jessica Chastain's obviously got the kind of connection through Andy Muschietti's one of his previous films, Mama. She was in that with Nikolai Coster-Waldau, Jamie Lannister. So she's got a connection there, so you always knew she was going to get cast in this film. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise, you know, he with the film being longer, it feels like he's not in it as much. His presence is still kind of felt because, you know, at certain points in the film when you meet certain characters, you feel Pennywise is actually being channeled through them. Even though, you know, Bill Skarsgård's not there, it feels like obviously Pennywise has taken over certain characters when they're having interactions with the Losers Club. So the kind of sense of foreboding that Pennywise brings is absolutely there throughout the course of the film, and I think that's kind of a testament to you know, Bill Skarsgård in the first place, because obviously when he's on screen as Pennywise, he's really good in a really kind of weird way. He's menacing without being menacing, and it's really kind of weird. But I think that it's because of the sense of history that the character has. He's really good, and it's kind of like, yeah, he's doing the goofy eyeball thing and the goofy lower lip thing. And he's working through all of the prosthetics and stuff like that. But he does inhabit Pennywise in a completely different fashion than what Tim Curry was, because there's absolutely no point just imitating what's come before. So he's gone in a completely different direction. I think it works. He's really good. He's Pennywise. There's nothing more to say on that than he is Pennywise for a new generation. So, and I think people are going to point towards this Pennywise rather than the Tim Curry one from the 90s, and arguably rightly so, because that was a little bit more theatrical and hammy, and different time, different medium as well, because it was a TV miniseries. So yeah, it's not as good as Chapter 1. It's a bit too long and a bit unbalanced, because, as I said before, I feel like some things that were meant to be in Chapter 1 were pushed into Chapter 2. And I have read that apparently the director Andy Muschietti is working on, in the same way as Kill Bill 1 and 2 is conceived as one whole movie, but it was just unfortunately chopped into two for its theatrical release. It was meant to be consumed as one really long movie. Apparently Andy Muschietti is working on a supercut, if you will, of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 stuck together, and he's going to be looking at getting that released. And if he does that, I'm on board. I'd be interested to see if he actually moves the placement of any of the scenes around to make a little bit more narrative sense and join things up that way, and see if he puts anything back into the film, because even though this is, like I say, touching 3 hours long, there's a lot of threads throughout the course of the film that are kind of alluded to but don't go anywhere. They're not paid off, and you feel like certain things may have happened but we didn't get to see them. So there are cuts in the film that you feel quite heavily at certain points, but having not read the book for over 20 years, I think I remember picking up a copy of the book, a really tatty copy of a book at Chesterley Street. Was it Chesterley Street Market back in the day? Yeah, I think it probably was, for like £2.50 or whatever. And I had that book for years and years and years when we moved away from Sunderland and came down here. So I've not read that since my high school days. And actually, fun fact, when we were doing an English assignment in high school, I got pulled to one side off my English teacher, Mr. Hart, and he gave us an assignment, like just a short story, and me being me, I went a sci-fi route, so I did this kind of like post-apocalyptic, very kind of like, in my head I was imagining kind of like a Terminator vibe movie, the future war kind of stuff, but there was a bit of a cult in there, a bit of witchcraft, and I actually I did take I paid homage. I flat out stole, like I called one of the chapters The Ritual of Shude from It, because I was reading It at the time, and I thought it was actually, there was just something about that title of the chapter that caught my mind, so I actually did that. And he pulled me to one side and he was like, look, I get what you're doing, but I've read the book, just so you know, and other people will have read the book, so they will get that. I was like, well, yeah. He said, if you're paying homage, that's fine, but if you're flat out stealing, that's not so okay. And that's when I kind of like, learnt the difference between, paying homage and referencing things, and flat out just fucking taking things chapter and verse. I didn't take things chapter and verse. I just took the title, but you get my point. So, but yeah, he was a good teacher, man. He was we bonded over. Because we had similar tastes in kind of like horror and things like that. So he'd obviously read, Stephen King, being an English teacher, he would read quite a lot of things. But I used to buy Fangoria magazine, and some days it'd be in my backpack, and I'd buy it on the shop on the way down. That was kind of my ritual. I'd go to the shop in the morning, I'd get a pint of milk, because I had a thing for drinking. I still have a thing for drinking milk, but I'd have a pint of milk every day on the way to school, and I would buy magazines on the way to school as well. And if Fangoria was out, then I'd buy that, because I was into effects and prosthetics and movies and all that kind of stuff. And so was he. So we had a bit of a it was a good. It's good when you have teachers who actually take an interest in the things that you're interested in, or vice versa, because you actually learn more in those classes, because you like the teacher who's delivering the knowledge and the classes, so you're more likely to listen to them. But yeah, that's well off topic. Anyway, It Chapter 2, good, not great, not as good as the first film, but if you like the first film, you're more than likely going to like this one. It's just a little bit too long, but I would be very interested in seeing the full supercut, everything put together, when that comes out. Hopefully it'll come out. They're not going to do that theatrically. No one's going to want to sit in a cinema for fucking 6 hours. Yeah, but people do double bills, don't they? There was a double bill for It Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and they did it with all the Marvel films and the Batman films and any film that's got a sequel. So maybe they will release it theatrically. Who knows? But I think that's probably going to be a home media thing. So yeah, when it comes out on Blu-ray, I'll pick it up, and hopefully, it'll be a more fleshed out. If they do the extended edition treatment like Lord of the Rings, and put back in things to actually make it a complete companion piece to the book, then yeah, I'd be really down for that. But as it stands, still really enjoyable. I came out entertained, if somewhat fatigued, and yeah, go and check it out if you like It Chapter 1. Go and watch it, because it finishes the story. And if you don't like it, or if you don't like clowns, then, well, I know quite a few people who probably aren't going watching this film, because I've dressed up as a clown before and seen the reactions that some people give. However, I'm not getting into that. I'm home now, so that's it. Yeah, Good Boys is not good. It's very bad. And It Chapter 2 is good, but not great. So, yeah. Until next time, guys.